Something quiet has been happening beneath the surface of modern relationships, and most men won't notice it until it's already cost them everything that matters. You can see it in the way a man begins to move through his day slower, heavier, as if every decision requires permission he hasn't been granted. He checks his phone more often than he used to. He explains himself in conversations that don't need explanation. He waits. He adjusts. He becomes careful in a way that has nothing to do with wisdom and everything to do with fear. This is not about one bad relationship or one difficult woman. This is about a pattern that repeats itself across thousands of individual lives, a pattern so common it has become invisible and so destructive that by the time a man recognizes it, he has already abandoned the very qualities that made him attractive in the first place. I work with men who describe this feeling in different ways, but the architecture is always the same. One man told me he couldn't remember the last time he decided without first calculating how she would react. Another said he felt like he was living in someone else's house, even though the lease was in his name. Another said he didn't recognize himself anymore, that somewhere along the way he had become a stranger in his own life. These men are not weak, they are not failures, they are not lacking in ambition or intelligence. What they lack is something more fundamental, a center of gravity that exists independent of female approval. And the moment a man loses that center, the moment he begins to orient his entire existence around maintaining a woman's comfort and validation, he triggers a mechanism in her that he will never understand until it's too late. She begins to lose respect for him, not because she wants to, not because she's cruel or manipulative, but because nature has wired her to recognize and respond to the presence or absence of masculine sovereignty, and no amount of modern ideology can overwrite that ancient circuitry. Aristotle understood this 2,400 years before dating apps and text messaging anxiety existed. He lived in a world where men were expected to govern themselves before they governed anything else, where the concept of virtue was not a feeling or an intention, but a disciplined practice, a set of habits that shaped character the way a river shapes stone. He watched men in the agora, in the gymnasium, in the courts and councils, and he saw that the ones who commanded genuine respect were never the ones who bent themselves into shapes designed to please others. They were the ones who had cultivated what he called mesetes, the golden mean, the principle of moderation, the ability to hold the center between excess and deficiency. And what Aristotle knew, what he taught to young men who would go on to lead armies and build empires, was this: a man who cannot govern his own desires, his own impulses, his own need for validation, will never be trusted with anything of value, not by other men, and certainly not by women, no matter what they say they want. The thesis is simple, and it runs through every failed relationship, every dead bedroom, every quiet humiliation that a man swallows alone at 3 in the morning. A man who abandons his own structure, his own discipline, his own mission to center his life around a woman's approval will inevitably become the kind of man she cannot respect. This is not a moral judgment. It is a description of a mechanism. Aristotle would call it a failure of temperance, a failure of practical wisdom, a collapse of the virtues that make a man capable of self-governance. And when a man loses self-governance, when he allows his appetites and fears to dictate his behavior, he becomes what Aristotle called acratic, weak-willed, unable to act according to his own better judgment. He knows what he should do, but he cannot bring himself to do it because the short-term relief of her approval feels more urgent than the long-term integrity of his own character. Let me show you how this looks in practice. A man meets a woman. The early days are intoxicating. She responds, she laughs, she leans in, he feels chosen. And in that feeling of being chosen, something inside him begins to shift. He starts checking his phone more often. He starts rearranging his schedule around her availability. He cancels plans with friends because she might be free. He skips the gym because she wants to see him. He stays up later than he should because the conversation is good. After all, he doesn't want to be the one who ends it first. These are minor adjustments, barely noticeable at first, but each one is a tiny surrender of structure, a tiny compromise of the discipline that held his life together before she arrived. And here, is what he doesn't realize. She is watching, not consciously perhaps, but some part of her, some ancient evaluative mechanism, is measuring the degree to which his life bends around her presence. At first, she might even encourage it. She might say she loves how attentive, available, and willing he is to prioritize her. But beneath the words, beneath the conscious narrative she tells herself, her nervous system is registering something else. It is registering the absence of resistance, the absence of a life that exists whether she is in it or not. And that absence, that hollowness, begins to erode her attraction in ways she cannot articulate and he cannot see. Aristotle would say the man has failed to practice sophrosyne temperance, self-restraint, the capacity to delay gratification in service of a higher good. He has allowed his desire for her approval to override his commitment to his own structure, and in doing so, he has violated the very principle that would have preserved her respect. Now the relationship enters a new phase. She begins testing, not maliciously, but instinctively. She cancels plans at the last minute. She becomes less responsive. She mentions other men casually, watches how he reacts. She creates minor conflict and small moments of uncertainty to see if he will hold his ground or collapse into reassurance seeking. And here is where most men fail the test without even knowing they're being tested. They double down on availability. They over-explain. They apologize for things they didn't do wrong. They ask what's wrong over and over until the question itself becomes a display of weakness. They try to solve her mood as if it's a problem that requires solving, rather than understanding that her mood is often a test of his capacity to remain unshaken. I once spoke to a man who described this exact pattern. He said he knew something had changed when he started rehearsing conversations in his head before he had them with her. He would anticipate her objections, preemptively adjust his tone, soften his language, all in an effort to avoid conflict. But the more he tried to manage her reactions, the less she respected him. She began to describe him as safe, which at first he took as a compliment. It wasn't. Safe, in her vocabulary, meant predictable. It meant non-threatening. It meant a man who had made himself so available, so accommodating, so stripped of boundaries that he no longer registered as a sexual being. He had become a friend, a therapist, a source of validation, but not a man who occupied her imagination in the hours when they were apart. And the cruelest part, the part that destroyed him when he finally understood it, was that she didn't want to feel this way. She wanted to respect him. She tried to desire him, but her body, her instincts, had already made the calculation, and no amount of conscious intention could override it. Aristotle wrote that virtue is a habit, not a feeling. It is something you practice daily, in small decisions, until it becomes the shape of your character. And the virtue he considered most essential for a man was phronesis, practical wisdom, the ability to discern the proper action in a given situation, not based on abstract rules, but based on a deep understanding of human nature and circumstance. A man with phronesis understands that what a woman says she wants and what her nervous system actually responds to are often two different things. She will say she wants a man who listens, who is vulnerable, who communicates his feelings, and she does want those things. But she wants them from a man who is already grounded, already self-governed, already committed to a mission that exists whether she is there or not. When a man offers vulnerability from a place of neediness or seeking validation, it does not create intimacy. It creates discomfort. It makes a subtle but pervasive sense that she is now responsible for his emotional stability, and that responsibility becomes a burden that slowly suffocates attraction. The mechanism continues. The man, sensing her pulling away, tries harder. He initiates more, he plans more, he gives more. But every gift, every gesture, every attempt to close the distance between them only widens it further, because the subtext of every action is the same. Please validate me. Please tell me I'm enough. And that need, that quiet desperation, is the opposite of the self-possession that first drew her to him. Aristotle would call this a failure of autarkia, self-sufficiency. the quality of being complete within oneself, not dependent on external validation for one's sense of worth. An autarkic man does not need a woman to complete him. He invites her into a life that is already full, already structured, already meaningful, and that invitation, that sense of being welcomed into something rather than being needed to create something, is what sustains attraction over time. But the modern world teaches men the opposite. It teaches them that love is about merging, becoming one, dissolving boundaries, and sharing everything. It teaches them that a good man is an open man, a vulnerable man, a man who holds nothing back. And while there is truth in that ideal, there is also a catastrophic blindness, because the perfect assumes that both people are coming from a place of wholeness, that both have cultivated their own structure, their own discipline, their own purpose. But most men today have not cultivated that. They have been raised in a culture that tells them their masculinity is toxic, that their desires are problematic, that their need for respect and sovereignty is a relic of patriarchy. And so they enter relationships already hollowed out, already seeking in a woman what they should have built in themselves. And the moment they do that, the moment they make her the center of their existence, they lose her. Let me zoom out and show you how this individual pattern connects to something larger. We are living through a moment in history where the mechanisms that once gave men structure, religion, military service, rites of passage, guilds, mentorship, have largely disappeared. Men are expected to figure out masculinity on their own, in a culture that simultaneously demands their participation and demonizes their nature. The dating market has become a panopticon of judgment, where every approach is a potential accusation, every expression of desire a potential humiliation. Social media has turned attention into a currency, and women, particularly young women, have access to a level of male attention that would have been unimaginable in any previous era. The result is a massive imbalance of power, and men feel it even if they cannot name it. They feel it in the silence after they send a message. They feel it in the casual cruelty of being ghosted. They feel it in the knowledge that they are one of dozens, maybe hundreds, competing for the exact moment of her attention. And so men withdraw. Not because they hate women, not because they've given up on love, but because the cost of participating has become unbearable. The risk of humiliation, of false accusation, of investing months or years into something that can be destroyed with a single conversation, a single mood, a single shift in her perception. It's too high, and this withdrawal is not a weakness. It is a rational response to an irrational system. Aristotle would understand this. He believed that a man must act within his control, and that wisdom often means recognizing when a game is rigged and refusing to play. But here is the tragedy. In withdrawing, men do not find peace. They find numbness. They see pornography, video games, endless scrolling, substances, anything to dull the ache of a life that feels purposeless. Because the alternative to seeking validation from women is not to seek validation at all. It is to seek something higher, something internal, something that cannot be taken away. And very few men today have been taught how to do that. If a system demands your vulnerability but offers no protection, walking away is not cowardice, it is the beginning of wisdom. But walking away is not enough, because if you walk away without building something in its place, you are still governed by the absence of what you left behind. You are still defined by what you are avoiding rather than what you are becoming. And this is where most men get stuck. They recognize the game is broken, but they don't know how to build a life that exists outside the game. They drift, they cope, they tell themselves they're fine, that they don't need anyone, that they're better off alone. But the numbness grows. The years pass, and one day they wake up and realize they have become strangers to themselves, that they have spent so long avoiding pain, that they have also avoided growth, avoided risk, avoided the very experiences that would have forged them into something more substantial. Aristotle's answer to this is not complicated, but it is demanding. He would say, return to virtue, return to the disciplined practice of becoming the kind of man who does not need external validation to know his own worth. This begins with small things. By keeping your word to yourself, with getting up when you said you would, with going to the gym even when you don't feel like it. By finishing the work you started, sitting in discomfort without immediately reaching for a distraction, by allowing her to be upset without collapsing into reassurance seeking, and holding your frame even when the pressure to abandon it is immense. These are not grand gestures, they are daily practices, but over time they accumulate into something unmistakable. They accumulate into self-respect, and self-respect is the only foundation upon which genuine attraction can be built. Notice when you begin to over-explain yourself in her presence. Stop. Notice when you rearrange your entire schedule around her availability. Stop. Notice when you apologize for things you don't believe you did wrong. Stop. Notice when you text her, seeking reassurance, validation, or proof that you still matter to her. Stop. Every time you do these things, you are training her to see you as a man who does not trust his own values, and she will treat you accordingly. Not because she is cruel, but because she is human, and humans respond to the energy others project. If your project needs, she will feel burdened. If you project self-possession, she will feel intrigued. It is not manipulation, it is nature. Allow her to have her moods without making them about you. Allow her to pull away without chasing. Allow her to test your boundaries without collapsing. Allow her to be uncertain without trying to solve it with words. Most men fail here because they interpret her distance as rejection and they respond with pursuit. But pursuit from a place of fear only confirms her doubts. The man who can sit in the tension, who can remain grounded while she works through whatever she needs to work through, is the man who passes the test. Not because he is playing a game, but because he has built a life that does not depend on her mood for its stability. Begin to move as if you are already the man you want to become, not as a performance, not as a facade, but as practice. Aristotle believed that you do not become virtuous by thinking about virtue. You become virtuous by acting virtuously over and over until it becomes your nature. You do not become confident by waiting to feel confident. You become satisfied by acting like a confident man, even when you are terrified. You do not become self-sufficient by waiting until you no longer need anyone. You become self-sufficient by building a life, a mission, a purpose, a structure that exists whether anyone else validates it or not. And when you do this, when you genuinely stop seeking her approval and start seeking your own alignment, something shifts. She begins to feel it, not because you told her, not because you explained, but because the energy has changed. You are no longer learning, you are no longer chasing, you are standing in your own gravity, and that gravity is magnetic in a way that neediness never is. If you ignore this, if you continue to center your life around a woman's approval, you will lose her. Maybe not today, maybe not next month, but eventually. And when you lose her, you will not understand why. You will replay every conversation, every gesture, every moment of vulnerability, trying to figure out what you did wrong. And the answer will elude you because the answer is not in what you did, it is in what you became. You became a man without structure, a man without a mission, a man whose entire sense of worth was outsourced to her perception. And she could feel it, even if she couldn't name it, and it slowly drained every ounce of attraction she once felt. 5 years from now, if nothing changes, you will still be having the same arguments, still seeking the same validation, still wondering why every relationship follows the same script. You will be smaller, more bitter, more convinced that the problem is women or culture or the system, because blaming external forces is easier than confronting the uncomfortable truth that you handed away your power and called it love. But if you take this as initiation, if you hear this not as criticism, but as a call to something higher, your life will look unrecognizable 5 years from now. You will have fewer people in your orbit, but the ones who remain will respect you. You will have less noise, less chaos, less drama, because you will have stopped attracting and tolerating it. You will have built something, a business, a craft, a body of work that exists independent of anyone's approval. You will walk differently. You will speak differently. You will no longer feel the need to explain yourself or justify your decisions to people who have not earned that level of access. And women will notice, not all women, But those capable of recognizing masculine sovereignty will notice, and they will respond not to your words but to the unmistakable frequency of a man who has stopped seeking and started building. This path is more challenging. It is lonelier at first. It requires you to sit with discomfort, to face the parts of yourself you have been avoiding, to accept that no one is coming to save you, and that the only validation that matters is the one you give yourself. It requires you to stop blaming women for responding to the energy you project and start taking responsibility for the kind of man you have become. It requires you to rebuild, from the ground up, a structure of discipline and purpose that can withstand pressure without collapsing. But it is the only path that preserves your dignity. It is the only path that leads to relationships built on respect rather than need. And it is the only path that will allow you to look at yourself in the mirror 10 years from now and recognize the man staring back, a man who abandons his own structure, his own discipline, his own mission to center his life around a woman's approval, will inevitably become the kind of man she cannot respect. This is the thesis. This is the pattern. This is the mechanism that has quietly destroyed more men than they will ever admit. And the solution is not to hate women. It is not to withdraw into bitterness. It is to return to the ancient practice of self-governance, to rebuild the virtues that make a man capable of standing in his own gravity, and to understand that attraction is not something you create with words or gestures or gifts. It is something that emerges naturally when a woman encounters a man who has built a life she wants to be part of, rather than a man who needs her to give his life meaning. She does not kill your mission. She reflects its absence. If this landed somewhere deep, if it named something you've been feeling but couldn't articulate, share it with the men in your life who need to hear it. Subscribe and keep this work alive. The architecture of masculinity is not built in a day, but it is built one decision at a time, and the decision starts now. No man who centers a woman stays centered himself.